Rabbi Hurwitz completed Drisha's 3-year Scholar Circle program, an advanced intensive program of study for Jewish women training to become scholars, educators, and community leaders. After another 5 years of study under the auspices of Rav Avi Weiss, she was ordained by Rav Avi and Rabbi Daniel Sperber in 2009. In 2013, Rabbi Hurwitz was awarded the Hadassah Foundation Bernice S. Tannenbaum Prize and the Myrtle Wreath Award from the Southern New Jersey region of Hadassah in 2014. In 2016, she was the Trailblazer Award recipient at UJA Federation of New York. She was named as one of the Forward 50 most influential Jewish leaders and Newsweek's 50 most influential rabbis. In 2017, Rabbi Hurwitz was chosen to be a member of the inaugural class of Wexner Foundation Field Fellows. She and her husband, Josh Abraham, are parents to Yona, Zachariah, Davidi, and Natan. We are thrilled today to learn with Rabbi Sarah, master teacher, on this very important subject. We know many of you are on the live stream. We'll be monitoring your questions there. Many of you are on the recording side. So if you're listening to the podcast, make sure to also check out the YouTube so you can see the sources. And those of you who are here in the Zoom, feel free to put questions and thoughts in the chat. And we'll also have a time for Q&A at the end as well. Rabbi Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to teach. I am glad to see some people here and to welcome the people on live stream and listening afterwards. And I am hoping that we can have a little bit of a dialogue and conversation. So whether that is live or after the fact, please be in touch. The topic that I picked today is tzedek and mishpat, when being right may be wrong. And the reason why I thought about this topic is when we think about ethics and justice, which is the overarching theme of this seminar and the topics that you're engaging with in general, I think that we have a tendency to draw a straight line between wrong and right. So there's something unjust, and our job and goal is to do everything in our power to right that wrong and to bring justice back to whatever the topic is that we're talking about. So I think for our purposes, it might be helpful to, in your mind, just take a few minutes to think about a time where you have seen an injustice in the world. You've seen some, it could be personal or global. It could be something, a global issue that the world is fighting, or it could be something in your own personal lives, your own families. But think for a minute in your head, what is a time, when is there a time where you just knew that you were right? You knew that you saw something that was wrong and you knew that you were going to do everything in your power to change it. So take a minute to think about what that thing is and just like really picture the topic. And I want us and I want you to consider, as you're thinking about your topic, whether the strategy that we're going to talk about today makes sense, whether there's always that straight line between wrong and right, and whether our goal and our role in the world and in life is to always pursue that rightness. And my overarching question is going to be, is there ever a time where we need to hold back? Is there ever a time where perhaps it is not right to be so right? So, my starting point actually is that I actually believe that I am always right. When I just basically think that if everybody would just listen to me, if everybody would just come, do what I say, then the world would be a better place. I'm not the only one who thinks this. There's a woman named Catherine Schultz, and she's a wrongologist. You can listen to a TED Talk she gives called On Being Wrong. And in her talk, she describes the notion of how you bring people along, or let them know that they are wrong. So generally, when you're thinking about your idea or the thing that you're passionate about, or the argument that you're making, or the thing you want to change, when you're trying to engage people in that process, and the first thing you might assume that if somebody disagrees with you, they're disagreeing with you, and that stems from a place of ignorance. And if you just give them the right facts, then they'll come over to your team, they'll come over to your side and realize that you're right. But then when you realize that they do not have all the correct information and still disagree with you, then maybe you'll assume that they're just idiots. They may just not understand the facts. And then when you discover that they have the correct information and are actually quite smart, then you decide that they're just plain evil, that they know the truth, but are distorting it for their own purposes. Has anybody ever had this experience? So the nods, I think, sort of speak to this phenomenon. So my starting point for us today is one of my favorite poems that some of you may have heard. I'm going to just share screen to bring us all together in the same place. This is from Yehuda Amichai, and it's called Hamakom Shebo Anu Tzakim, from the place where we are right. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard, but doubts and loves dig in the world. Like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. So I don't know if people online want to participate a little bit and say what they think the poem is about. Like, what is Yehuda Amichai's main point that he's trying to convey to us?
Well, there seems to be a question about growth, about whether we wish to be forward-looking. We actually wish something to be generative. We actually want progress. We actually want healing, or whether we just want to stay in this stuck place.
Yeah, and there's something about, if we don't step back and recognize that we might not always be right, there's a place that doesn't allow for growth and for spring and for things to generate. So let's just use this as a jumping off point. We're going to get back to the poem. And of course, the point here, the word that is used over and over again is tzedek, it's sodkim. So if we had to generate some working definitions of tzedek, what might they be? Right, so we have examples from Bereshit, right? Tzedek tirdof is one example that comes to mind. Justice you shall pursue, and so there it's defined as pursuing something where you want to turn something wrong and you want to make it right. You want to achieve a sense of justice. Let's think about some other contexts where we see the word tzedek to try to get a working definition of what it actually means. So one example, for example, is in Bereshit. This is one of my favorite verses, my favorite psukim, when God is realizing that Abraham is the founder of justice in some way, of tzedek in some way. And God realizes that before he goes and destroys Sodom, the people of Sodom, he should really take a minute and check in and tell Abraham. And so God comes down and says, defines and calls Abraham really the arbiter of justice. Ki yadativ lama'an asher yitzaveh epanav ve'ebeto acharav v'shamru Derech Hashem la'atzot tzedakah u'mishpat. For I have known him to the end that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of the Lord and do righteousness and justice to the end, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken of him. So why does God come down to Abraham? Because he is really, I think, the founder of tzedakah u'mishpat. So what does tzedakah mean over here? What does tzedek mean over here? The translation is righteousness. A path forward that is perhaps derech Hashem, that is godly, is imbued with a sense that we are living as God's creatures in a realm of tselem Elokim, that we are all godly, and therefore we should pick a path that is right and correct and direct, and not stray from that path. So it's also a form of justice, but a direct path or rightness. What are some other times that the word tzedek comes in our Tanakh? So I'll just share a few others. Again, we're trying to get a working definition of what tzedek really means. So in Tehillim, tzedek u'mishpat mechon kis'echa chesed ve'emet yikadmu panecha. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Mercy and truth go before you. I love this image of God's throne and surrounding the pillars, the foundation, the essence of God's throne. What makes the world go around are these four pillars, and they are mercy, righteousness and justice, tzedek and mishpat, and mercy and truth, chesed and emet. And you need all four, it seems, to be part of the foundation. Here, it doesn't really define out what tzedek means, except that it's something different to whatever mishpat is and whatever chesed is and whatever emet is. I think that otherwise it would just be one, right? So maybe one could say that the recipe, like part of tzedek, is having mishpat and chesed and emet. The part of tzedek is being somebody who knows mercy and knows truth and knows justice. But it seems like tzedek is something in and of itself. Okay, it's hard to define. That's what I'm trying to get to over here. We're trying to get to some notion, ideas. When the Torah says be righteous, be tzedek, embody the sense of being, a righteous person. What does it mean? Here's another opportunity to define the word. So again, in Tehillim, Ashrei hagever asher tiyasrenu ya imitartecha talmidenu. Happy is the man or the person whom you discipline, or Lord, the person you instruct in your teaching, to give him or her tranquility in times of misfortune until a pit be dug for the wicked. For the Lord will not forsake God's people. God will not abandon God's very own. And then it says, Ki ad tzedek yashuv mishpat v'acharav kol yishrei leiv. Righteousness shall again accord with justice, and all the upright shall rally to it. So there's something about being a good, upright, standing individual that is the opposite of wickedness, the opposite of evil or bad in the world. Then you achieve this notion or this idea of tzedek. So we stopped here and we had to define tzedek so far. I think we don't have a great, definition, but I think we have a notion that it has something to do with goodness, with being righteous, with finding a straightforward path, with something to do with the opposite of evil. And that's pretty much, the English definitions, which sometimes fall short, help us understand righteousness is about being a righteous person, working with rightness in the world. I want to share Rambam's definition, which is a little bit, I think, a little bit different, or maybe it's the same, I don't know. But I think just a slightly different definition of tzedek. So Rambam is commenting in the 208th mitzvah, and he's commenting specifically in the mitzvah in Sefer Vayikra about honest weights and measures. And in Vayikra it says, Lo ta'asu aval b'mishpat, b'midah, b'mishkal, u'b'meshura, u'mo'oznei tzedek, avnei tzedek, ephad tzedek, v'hin tzedek, yiheh lachem, ani Hashem, lechem, asher hotzeiti etchem, eretz Mitzrayim. So the pasuk says you must have an honest, a tzedek, balance, honest weights, honest ephah, and honest hin. In the words of the Sifra, the phrase an honest balance, the word tzedek, means that you must ensure that the balances are totally accurate. Honest weight means that you must ensure that the weights are totally accurate, meaning an honest ephah means that you must ensure that all ephahs are totally accurate. An honest hin means that you must ensure that all hins are totally accurate. So what is this working definition of tzedek according to Rambam, according to this pasuk in Vayikra? What does tzedek mean here? Anybody want to give a summary?
Well, it's not about accuracy isn't the main point. Like it's not the same as your punctuation must be accurate. Accuracy, this case, accuracy means that they must be correct so that you don't overcharge or undercharge.
And I think the word, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I was just about to flap incoherently and drift off, so that.
Thanks, Mike. And I think that the word maybe that you were going to say next, maybe not, it has to be precise, right? When you're talking about accurate weights and measures, it has to be exact. You can't shift to the left or to the right. So how does this give this, what is this new definition of tzedek? Tzedek means it has to be so precise. You can't, like it's almost this like narrow path, this narrow way of being. So tzedek here doesn't mean that, you know, this like sort of open-ended definition of righteousness. It actually means in order to fulfill the definition of tzedek, it has to be so precise and accurate, and that if it's anything other, it's dishonest. It's the inaccuracy means it's as if you weren't honest in your balance and weights and measures. This is like a very narrow definition of tzedek, but I think it helps, you know, give some flavor to what this word tzedek might mean. And it's with this definition that I want to share and learn this Mishnah with you, and this piece in the Gemara. So it's stay with me for a minute because it's going to seem a little bit out of left field. So the Mishnah is describing the problem of the stolen beam, the Marish Hagazal. So Hagazul, the beam that has been stolen. So what happened is that somebody stole the thief stole person A's beam, and the thief took the beam and built it into a bira, into a building, into a castle. And the question on the table is, once the thief has been caught, how do you make the person A whole? How do you make the person who lost that marish, that beam, whole? So just looking at the Gemara, the beam has been stolen and the thief went and built it into a large building or a palace. The rabbis taught if a man wrongfully takes a beam and builds it into a palace, Beit Shammai say that he must demolish the whole palace and restore the beam to its owner. Beit Hillel, however, say that the latter can claim only the monetary value of the beam so as not to place obstacles in the way of the penitents. So let's stay a little bit and understand the machloket between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Obviously, Beit Hillel makes sense. What we're saying is Beit Hillel is, there's no need to break down the whole building in order for the beam itself to be returned. The monetary value is what is important. Now, that's generally, as you know, we're a Beit Hillel community and we generally go according to Beit Hillel, and that's how we're going to rule. But let's stay in the world of Beit Shammai for 1 minute. What kind of world does Beit Shammai imagine? Beit Shammai is basically saying, let me tell you what tzedek is. Let me tell you what fair is. Let me tell you what justice is. Justice, according to Beit Shammai, is returning that lost beam, no matter what. Shammai is saying that in order to return that specific lost item to its rightful owner, even if it requires the destruction of the entire building, that is fair. That is justice. So is this a kind of world we want to exist in, right? What is the kind of world that we want to, what is Beit Shammai's world, right? Actually, it might be a good world, right? Because what Beit Shammai is basically saying is there's rules and there's laws. And if the consequences are such that the buildings are going to need to be destroyed, then you're creating a world where people are not as likely going to break the rules. It's a very strict way of operating. It's like the idea, if you drop gum on the floor and you're prosecuted in a law of court for littering, right? So then you have a very clean society. You have a very pristine world. So maybe the world of Beit Shammai makes a lot of sense. What's the other side of Beit Shammai? Mike, were you going to say something?
In the world of Beit Shammai, if you drop some litter, and instead of paying the fine, or instead of doing community service by going to the park and cleaning it up, you'd have to track down that exact piece of litter, it seems to me.
Right. And maybe that's fair, right? You dropped it, you pick it up, right? Why should somebody else have to pick up your litter? Think about it in relation to something that is valuable, right? So we're talking about here just a beam, a marish. But what if we change this to a family heirloom? Maybe it's a locket, right? Passed down from my grandmother, from her grandmother to my grandmother, to my mother, to me. And now somebody's stolen that very special piece of jewelry. Do I want the monetary value of that locket? No. I want the exact piece of jewelry that was stolen, and I'm going to do everything in my power to get that locket back, that piece of jewelry back. That's fair. That's right. So I welcome Beit Shammai. I want Beit Shammai in the world. That is just, that is fair, that is tzedek. On the other hand, the world of Beit Shammai is possibly one where there's a lot of broken buildings. There's a lot of castles that have needed to be crumbled in order to return that which belongs to others. And maybe it's not a society that works as well. Maybe it's not the exact society where I want my children to grow up in, where they have to where there has to be a certain amount of destruction in order to redeem what was lost. Now, there are times where I would say that, to just riff off of this for a minute, there are times where there's an entire system that is broken. And in order to fix, one has to really break it down in order to rebuild, right? We can imagine all sorts of injustices in the world where systems need to be fixed. I don't want to pick on any one topic, but you're probably imagining, whatever the political, environmental, or social issue is, there are times where the whole system needs to be broken, and out of brokenness is the ability to rebuild. So maybe that's what Beit Shammai is saying. When something is so wrong, when something is so unjust, when something is so unrighteous, there's a time and a place where we have to break something down in order to build it. I think that the imagery of the marish, of the beam, is purposeful here, right? Maybe it's not like a heirloom or a piece of jewelry on purpose, because what is the image of that marish? It's a foundational beam. It's something that you need in the internal infrastructure in order to build something. It's not that it's the pretty external, the aesthetics on the outside of that building. It's the very foundation. And if the foundation is stolen, if the foundation is built on bad principles, if the foundation is rocky in any way because it is not right, is not fully tzedek, is not fully just, then perhaps it really does have to be broken down in order to be rebuilt, in order to be redeemed and rebuilt. And yet, I think in most instances, and now we can go back to that imagination that you had at the beginning of your situation, of asking this question in the world of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Is there ever a time where you would break something in order to achieve your rightness, in order to get what you need? Or is there a time where you recognize that we have to be in the world of Beit Hillel, that we might have to fall short on this ultimate definition of tzedek, this ultimate definition of returning the exact beam back? Is there a time where your being right may not have been so right? You know, I can just talk about my journey for a minute, right? Just to give a live example. I know in my body and in my bones that that the idea of women, Orthodox women as rabbis in spiritual leadership and clergy was right. And I think there was a time, and there is a time, where I feel like the system needed to be broken in order to be rebuilt. There needed to be a shaking up in order to allow the community to help the community recognize and see women as spiritual leaders. And yet there were people who felt that it was too fast, too soon, that they weren't ready. I remember the phone ringing back in those early days, and I picked up the phone and somebody said, "You're destroying the Orthodox community," and he hung up on me. And I wondered, was I? I didn't want to be the cause of destruction. I didn't want to be the person who was destroying an entire building, an entire community. And so there were moments where I wanted to take it all back, and I wanted to leave the marish, to leave the foundation where it was. But I think that there are times where we need to shake something up in order to rebuild. But I often wonder, is it too far? Is it too much? Is it, you know, this thing that I know is so important, that I see as so right, is so just? Are there communities where it's not right? Is it possible that even though I know this to be ethical and true and good, it's not ethical and true and good for every community? And therefore my standing on ceremony and saying this is the most just in the world may not be true for every place and time and community. I have to ask myself, and it's a hard question because, as I said at the beginning, I know I'm always right. It's a hard question because I have to say, are there limits to my rightness? Are there times where I have to pause? And so I want to ask us now, how do we pursue rightness while mitigating it to know when there is a point and a time where we might have to hold back, where rightness where righteousness might not be rightness? So I want to go back to those psukim that we riffed off at the beginning. I think if you notice, most of the psukim that I picked came in the context of one other word, right? So there are times when it doesn't come in, you know, very few times where it doesn't come in the context, but usually, if you notice, the word tzedek often comes with the word mishpat. Staka u'mishpat, it says in Bereshit, right? Tzedek and mishpat, whatever the definition of mishpat is, we're going to think about that in a second. Should I keep going?
Yeah, there's a little tech challenge, but please keep going.
Okay. It's so helpful that we're told when we're recording and when we're not recording, but it's like everybody must know it. So in Tehillim in 89, there too, we have the four pillars of God's throne, and it's tzedek and mishpat, right there next to each other, as well as chesed and emet. And if you look in most other places where the word tzedek comes in the Torah, it always comes with the word mishpat. So what does that mean? What does that mean? So I want to suggest that it's possible that tzedek is what we should be pursuing. Righteousness, justice, whatever the definition of that is, that preciseness is what we should be in this world to achieve and do and bring about. That is our tafkid in this world. But perhaps it's we have to pause and wonder whether it needs to be mitigated by mishpat. We could spend the rest of the hour coming up with working definitions of mishpat. And you can look at it in all sorts of contexts. And I could say that it's the law, right? Mishpat is often associated with the actual thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not murder, the civil laws that are brought down. In other places, mishpat is really just like we see over here, the parallel to tzedek. It's the same thing. It's righteous, it's justice, it's the same words that are used interchangeably. But I think what we're saying is that the two words somehow need to be aligned in order for us to be walking properly in this world. You see, we looked at this already, but back to this, to source number 4, there are times, perhaps, and this is where the Zohar helps give us, the Zohar comments on this pasuk and says in Tet Vav, Ki ad tzedek yashuv mishpat. And the Zohar notices that this is an example where the word, literally tzedek, is separated from the word mishpat. And when those two words are separated, even by that one little word, the world is out of sync. The world, says the Zohar, doesn't work so well. And we have to spend our entire life trying to bring tzedek and mishpat back together. Righteousness shall accord with justice, and all upright shall rally to it. When will there be yishrei lev? When will there be goodness and happiness? Ashrei hagever. When will there be satisfaction and goodness and happiness in the world? When tzedek has found mishpat, and when mishpat has found tzedek. When these two words are aligned side by side. And so I go back to our poem. Back to the top, sorry to make you dizzy. I go back to the top of to this poem, and I really believe that Yehuda Amichai knew Al Gemara that we learned together when he wrote this, right? What does he say? And a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. If we are going around destroying all buildings, now I'm sure that the image here is meant to be maybe the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, but could it just be that palace, that building that we referenced, that Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai were arguing over? And perhaps what Yehuda Amichai is saying is when we are going around destroying buildings in order to achieve tzedek, in order to achieve rightness, there's no room for spring, and there's no room for love and doubts and for growth. And so perhaps our tafkid in this world is looking to create and find a way to bring about ethics and justice and goodness and righteousness in the world, but to do it in a way that allows for growth. And perhaps it's possible that there are times where it's not always helpful to be so right. Like Karen Schultz told us, that wrongologist, it could be a time where we look up into the wide world and see all the stars and realize that we might not know, that maybe just sometimes we're wrong, and accepting that ability that we might not always have the grand vision of what is truly ethical and just might give us pause sometimes to know when we have to take a beat and consider whether this is something that's going to destroy a building, whether that building needs to be destroyed in order to be rebuilt, whether it's not worth it. It's not worth the destruction of the building in order to return that stolen marish, in order to find growth and spring and love. We might have to stop and pause and not destroy in order to rebuild. A lot to consider, and it's a strategy for thinking about the work we do in the world. It's a strategy for working even harder and committing even more so to the pursuit of justice, but to consider doing it in a way that is productive and fruitful, and I think aligned with this image of God's throne, of tzedek and mishpat, and emet and chesed, all being the foundations and the pillars of walking with godliness in the world. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions or conversation, discussion, pushback, I would love to hear your thoughts.
In the Guide of the Perplexed, Maimonides contrasts something with Chesed. He talks about them together. Chesed is excessive kindness, both to those who have earned your kindness and those who haven't. And the other one was just plain old reward and punishment. And I believe that was Mishpat. That was Maimonides. I believe that was Maimonides' reading of Mishpat. I could be wrong about what word he used in contrast to Chesed. So in which case you should ignore everything I just said.
So I don't remember if you're right or wrong, but my point, I think, is that it doesn't matter, right? There are so many definitions of mishpat, just like there's so many definitions of tzedek, and I think they're right in certain contexts and they work in the context they're in. But I think that however you define them, there needs to be a mitigation from one to the other. That, you know, when you're defining tzedek in Rambam's preciseness, this precise, you know, that's a hard way to live, to be that honest. Perhaps what's missing from that Vayikra, from that Maimonidean sense of that strict justice, is mishpat. Maybe mishpat there needs to be a little bit more of leeway, a little bit more of openness, a little bit more of a tzedek, a mishpat, a righteousness and a justice that's open. And both of them are needed side by side in order to live. It's a midrash, right? It's a midrash on how to see these two words that can interact side by side. And I think it is interesting to come up with the working definitions. That's where we started with tzedek, and we could do the same thing with mishpat, because I think it is useful and helps us. But I think regardless of all, and you'll see that it's going to be something different in different contexts, there's something about the combination of the words that is most relevant for me.
What do you think is the inner work of teshuvah here? For those who view themselves as leaders, activists, who are really holding robust commitment for change, and yet they really want to give more space, more humility, more of a process of continuity, more of a desire for peace, while holding that, but don't really know how to do that, because from such a deep place of their identity is that they're a radical revolutionary, or that they are so fully right and they have to demonize the other. They want to get there, but don't know how. Like, what's the inner work of teshuvah there?
Such an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I think the inner work of teshuvah is exactly as you say, Rosh Muli. It begins with the reflection and the self-analysis of right and wrong. And I think that when we're doing this change work, I think a question where we must ask ourselves is, are we doing it for us or for it or for them? And I think if it's only for us, that's when we need to take a pause and to consider whether we're doing it to be right, if we're doing it for power, if we're doing it for a sense of recognition. And, there's a time and place where those things are actually okay, right? It's okay if it propels the good forward. But I think if that's the only reason and way in which we're bringing about change, then I think we need a process of self-reflection. And I think that's what teshuvah is, right? Teshuvah is an internal process that a taking score of why and how we're putting ourselves into the world. And I think that going through that process is only going to make the work that one does out in the world better and more effective when we have that sense of humility that, we might want to pause and reflect and consider how our actions are impacting the world. Right? That's what Anisha was saying, that it's possible that when we're just pursuing rightness without thinking about anything else, we're going to be in a path of destruction, and that's not useful.
I wonder, I don't know if this is like accurate grammatically or Hebraically, but it feels to me like mishpat is a sense of judging. And in order to judge, you have to really be able to consider points of view that aren't your own. And so that's what's wrong with just tzedek, which is this precision, that it's a sense of like having in your mind, I might be wrong. Probably not, but I might be. And I also wanted to say, that the whole Orthodox world did not fall apart when you became Rabbanit. So sometimes we over worry about our destructiveness.
Thank you. It's a good corrective. So to your point about, again, definitions of mishpat, I think it's what I said already. I think that it's true that it's about like bringing more kindness to each of those words. Again, like I use the word, it's mitigating one to the other, but I think the way you framed it is accurate as well. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I think that what Hillel said in Avot about being dam chaf zechut to everyone kicks in here. It helps if you don't assume that the other person is evil. Going back to what you said earlier, that person can have all the facts, they can understand the facts, and still they disagree with you. There must be something perverse about it. And that's not, as you say, that's not necessarily the case. They might just have a different perspective. I think it kind of may help keep you away from self-righteousness.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, and I think that I found Catherine Schultz's sort of 3 definitions useful is because it's articulating the process that we go through. I do. I mean, I think that process of like you saying, assuming the other person is evil or wrong, we get there so fast. And I think we forget about the topic and focus in on the person. That person is evil. And I think we've lost the ability to disagree, regardless, without attacking the person that we're disagreeing with. And I think that that's exactly what Hillel's point is, right? If you are seeing the other person through a frame of knowing that they're not evil or they're coming from a good place, then it's actually much easier to disagree and to argue a point and to have a back and forth that is respectful. And that back and forth machloket also, I think, could lead to growth, and it can also lead to important things. I think if we all agreed, then we would have the Tower of Babel. That's not what the world was meant to be like. And so I think the point is not to not argue or not fight or not to pursue justice or not to bring changes into the world. But I think you're right, Mike, it's to do it in a way that assumes best intentions and also that, the world is worth fixing, right? It's the best intentions of the world as well, that the topic and the passion and the thing that we are pursuing is it's going to be better. It's a very hopeful way of seeing the world. Like the world will be better when we, put all of the energy and effort necessary to bring about this change. But we're also doing it in a way where we're not destroying things on the way. We're not doing it from a place of destruction, but a place of improving. Much more hopeful for that world.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rabbi Sarah, for this awesome shir. There's so much to learn here in process. And I just give us all the bracha that we continue to work for change and do it in ways that are generative and not destructive, and do it in ways that have humility and not arrogance. That we can work for Tikkun and yet do it in a way that brings us closer together rather than sowing more division and brokenness. Thanks so much, Rabbi Sarah, and thank you all so much, near and far, for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a great day.